Hello, and welcome to Woman with Bunny Ears, Season 3, Episode 9, a Twin Peaks podcast, also known as We Want Headbands, a 4-syllable and 1-character podcast in Baseline, where today we will be discussing listener feedback on Book 11. Well, first order of business, we have an RSS feed. That's right, it's somewhere out there on the internet. You can finally hook it into your apps, whatever people do. It'll probably be in the description.
Yeah,
So that should be fun.
That sounds fun. Yeah, I personally much prefer having things in my podcatcher than on YouTube. Although, while futzing around with the settings in my podcatcher recently, I have discovered that I can apparently subscribe to YouTube through Podcast Addict. So,
wow.
Maybe that is the thing that if I ever run into that problem, I have a solution for, potentially. But yes,
True.
In the meanwhile, we do have an actual podcast feed for y'all. Cool. And I suppose that is as good a time as any to mention that I am apparently a professional podcaster now.
How do you mean?
How do I mean? This is I don't think I've even told you this story. So I because I'm a good citizen, I respond to polls on political matters. And I recently got a call from the local newspaper who wanted to ask me about my opinions on, I think, raising gas taxes and tolls and such to pay for public transit. And without going into that conversation, I was asked what my profession is. And I really couldn't think of anything because technically I'm unemployed, but I have things I am doing, just not for money. And I realized, of the individual things that I am managing to do nowadays, the podcast that we are doing right now actually takes a plurality of my time. So
that is both cool and bad.
That is as much as I was able to answer that question from the reporter. As for what I do is I am a podcaster now, which is cool. I kind of like that title. I just also feel like that's kind of silly because I'm only doing this one incredibly niche casual podcast with I think we have double-digit listeners at this point. Maybe.
Wow. Up to 2 whole digits of listeners? Incredible.
Quite possibly. Including ourselves.
That's true. That's 2 for free.
2 free listeners.
But yeah, you're now in the paper of record of your town as a professional podcaster.
So technically, I don't think I am. It's just they have to ask that question of everybody they interview, along with other, demographic such. So if I do wind up in the local paper, it is possible that I could have podcaster next to my name.
You are now in the filing cabinet, so the local paper of record.
Yes. Cool. So, it is an off week, which means we're going to be doing a little chat about listener feedback. And then I'll stitch on the end of this some things I cut out of the main podcast last week that are more niche digressions that I decided were too much padding on an already long episode. So now they will pad a slightly shorter episode.
I've never read it, but I hear that The Tale of the Tub has alternating chapters labeled narrative and digression, and we've been trending in that direction.
That's interesting. The story of our lives being the narrative, right?
Yes.
The story of our lives reading these stories.
Yes.
Meta level. Those
Yeah.
above all
Whoa.
gods.
Am I in a visual novel right now? That's crazy.
Oh my goodness.
So, did you want to jump on to the first piece of feedback?
Yeah, let's look at the list. So the first bit of feedback is from you noted that the one butcher noted uh, that EroLARP is obviously a reference to the porny ratfic, the Arrow Gamer, which also originated the SED seduction stat from an earlier episode and was written by Groon the Walker, who is as smart as Yudkowsky. And I think that there is this one of the ones where there's like a controversy about some people thinking it's Yudkowsky.
I guess I've never read it
Because it is
before.
a pseudonym, I believe.
And, my decision theory is that I'm not going to go hunt down everything Eliezer Yudkowsky ever wrote under various pseudonyms. It's hard enough to track down the stuff he wrote under his real name and
Yeah.
publicly announced. So I don't really care. But apparently, the concept of the EroLARP is from the Aero Gamer, even though it just seemed generic to me. And Lord Surth also says, isn't the Aero Gamer actually linked to in that tag? And Ineosh, yes, React agreed. I didn't see that. I went back and I tried to look for that, and couldn't find what they were talking about. But if it is, then I might read it. See what all the fuss is about.
Ah,
See if it's
and
good.
maybe we'll do that entire thing as a bonus
Yeah,
episode for our
yeah.
-1 patrons.
We're gonna extort that guy for so much money.
So much.
Yeah,
Um,
although I have recently had a lot less time to read, so that was sort of a plan when I was walking around thinking, now that I'm no longer reading ahead, so as to not read even further ahead in this book, maybe I could read something else.
we have been seeing some anxious readers, let's say, wondering when the next book episode is coming out. And I am quite happy with my reading pace and podcast episode editing pace that I think every 2 weeks is a schedule that works for me at the moment. So
That's
you
good.
can
That's good.
continue to expect that. And I believe we have officially moved our release day to Wednesday because we usually record over the weekends.
Can we officially move our release date to wild card?
We can move it to wild. I mean, it's kind of been a wild card up until now.
Mm.
Why?
Wild card parentheses Wednesday.
Yeah.
I'm just spitballing. Let's try for Wednesday, I guess, if it works best for you.
Maybe I should like release as soon as I'm done editing, and we can aim for like a median of Wednesday.
Or maybe like an average of Wednesday and Monday, if only there were such a thing.
Yeah. If only there
Uh,
were a day in between those 2 days.
well, anyway, yeah, I'll just follow your lead because the most important thing is that you have fun because that means you win,
Yay.
according to the old syllogism.
Having fun is winning.
If you had fun, you won.
Okay. I
Mhm.
well, I agree with that sentiment in
Mhm.
general. I believe
Mhm.
I have mentioned that a few times on our Discord channel that when I play just about any game, tabletop role playing game, or just a board game, I generally do not play to win. And in tabletop role playing games, I will actually make characters that are deliberately underpowered in service of the character being interesting. And I will uh, accept the disadvantages that bestows on me and just try to roll with them. Because, it's a game. I am not trying to get money out of it. Although there are some people who do get money out of playing tabletop role-playing games.
Is it like
Which
competitively or entertainment wise?
I doubt everything exists under the sky. I think there's just a bunch of entertainment. I've heard
But
of,
they have the same constraint then. They're not even really playing to win.
yeah, they are not playing in the style of they only get paid if they beat the game. Yeah. But also with tabletop role playing games in general, it's a negotiation, like in Glowfic, where you've got two sides right in the story, and the rules are just sort of a medium in order to resolve conflicts that we don't want to have to negotiate through.
Yeah.
So, I think you've got a couple notes on names.
Well, first I'm going to tease that I did
Oh,
realize I did make miscellaneous notes while I was reading parts of the book that we've already gone over, or parts of the fictional piece, I guess. And so I think on some week when we don't have a lot of listener feedback, I'll just bring those up and leaf through them and go, ah, yes, that was a good line. I thought was good. Still is good.
yes, file those away like the soundbite outtakes I'm getting from editing the
Oh,
episode.
God.
I've
What
got
could
one
he
of you
possibly be
sneezing.
planning?
Yeah, I've got some sneezes. I've got some kitties. I've got some awkward segues, let's say. Uh, I think a supercut of segues might be a cool way to fill time if we run out of things.
Well, speaking of awkward segues, here's the next thing I want to talk about. The
Oh, yeah.
the names of these people. I recently said that I thought Miyalsvor was just a reference. What's his actual? What's his
Miyalsvor
full title?
Costigan, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. So Fergus Nemahadva pointed out that his name is a reference to Mile Vorkosigan, which is a fictional character from some series of books, and I think he's like a really smart guy. There might be economics involved. I believe it's science fiction. I just saw the Wikipedia page once when someone pointed this out, and not as I thought, just a reference to the story that we were currently reading. An interesting part is that actually Fergus had previously pointed this out, and I had just forgotten that by the time we got to talking about it. So it's a 2 points to him, I guess.
Yes.
Let's see. My next note is that a random review I read online, or also its comment section, claims that there are multiple Paizo canon pieces of art of Abrogail.
Yes.
So there could possibly be a second face cast for Abrogail. Maybe give her some emotional range. I don't know.
And of course, as soon as you mentioned that, I ran a Google image search to see all these, purely for research purposes.
Mm.
And there's a handful of official art, and notably the lead, let's say, official art shows her with her hair in kind of like Princess Leia buns,
Hmm.
and it looks, in my opinion, a lot less sexy than the picture we got in Planecrash. So I'm glad they went with the one that they did. There are a few other sexy, attractive, uh, classically attractive, let's say, traditionally. But the main ones are just her being powerful, I think, is what they are trying to portray, not her being feminine or pretty, let's say.
Hmm.
Because she is, a tyrant. And so they emphasize that tyrantness, particularly with her crown, which in the picture we have in Planecrash, she has sort of a diadem-like headband. So I think that one might actually not be official, because in the other official images I've seen, she is wearing a crown that has sort of a tall spike in the middle, and then what could be either uh, claws or dragon wings. So it's, but they're like spiked on the top and the bottom. So it's, let's just say it's a lot bigger than a diadem, and more royal, you might say.
You might even say it looks like bunny ears.
It,
Ooh,
oh, yeah.
but
We
only
have
a
a
little,
lot of,
tiny amount.
yeah, we've got a lot of lovely headbands references throughout this podcast and this story. And that is a digression I may throw in at the end of this episode. Uh,
Okay.
if you recall from last week, I cut out most of that. Uh,
I live in the moment. It's up
you
to
do live in the,
your skilled editing hands what lives and what dies, mostly.
yes. All right. So yeah.
Yeah, all those other canon pieces of art, now that you pointed them out, I'm like, are these even the same woman? How come they don't have the same little smirk? They have a completely different class of smirk.
Oh yes.
Mm. Well, anyway. Oh, so the next piece of feedback was just something I was thinking about, which was at one point you pointed out that there are several different spellings of Lil Ratha's name. And I thought, oh my God, what if that's intentional because Keltham isn't remembering it? But actually, it is not. That isn't really a plausible thing that could be happening because her canon name is Lil Ratha, and then also Lil Ratha is given in third person omniscient as well, or at least it seems to me that way. Maybe it's technically within some character's perspective, but not Keltham's. And
Mm-hmm.
then she also gives her own name as Lil Ratha, which is
Mm-hmm.
just different. She's wrong about her own name. I don't know what that's about. So I'm starting a new conspiracy theory that's much like the taller Luke conspiracy theory about Star Wars.
Uh-huh.
And I think each one of those is a distinct character. And for that scene, they were all trading places for no
Ah.
reason.
So
It
she's
never
kind of
comes up
like,
again.
we're seeing facets of Rilotha like we do with Nethys. Just every now and then, she gets asked a question that she doesn't quite know the answer to, but another one of her does. And so flicker, and she is a different person.
No, they're three different people. One of them looks exactly like Contessa Lurlatha, and then one of them looks like one of the Three Stooges, and one of them looks like one of the Marx Brothers, and they just run in and stand there for a second and then run away. That's my theory.
That, yeah, that is something that Keltham, I think, might not even mention, because his culture, the Dathalon culture, is, I would say, very accepting of foreign customs. Like,
Hmm.
we've seen a
Hmm.
lot of digressions about how this whole thing uh, of all this decision theory stuff is particularly applicable when you know nothing about your uh, trading partners' customs. And so, this might just be a thing where, like, oh, yeah, he's talking to Lil Ratha, and then in comes Lil Ratha, and they continue their conversation. And
My
he's
plane crash themed rapper name will be Lil Ratha.
yeah. And Keltham just doesn't mention it because it's like, okay, well, this is just a thing that this particular culture does.
Yeah, he didn't mention it because that's what they do on Dathalon too. And if you just thought about it, it would be
Ooh,
obvious to you why you would do that. So he didn't even remark upon it.
yes.
Yeah. All right. Is the next note yours?
Probably. Let me scroll back up. Uh,
Let Right, because I flagged this and then I investigated, and then I thought, no, my previous theory was stupid.
Yeah. So I do have a correction for myself. I believe I went on a digression about how security might have demonic contracts in order to allow them to do mind reading. Uh, and I looked it up eventually and found that there is a magic item, in fact, that will give you mind reading. It is entitled the Helm of Telepathy, and curiously, it is not imbued with telepathy. It gives the wearer at will detect thoughts, and they can communicate with the people whose thoughts they are reading, but only in their own language. So if there is a language barrier, they can't communicate across it, which distinguishes it from the telepathy spell, which allows you to communicate with anybody who has any language. And that's a higher level spell, so the Helm of Telepathy is made somewhat affordable at the low price of 13,500 gold pieces.
What's that in unskilled labor hours?
I did not look that up, and I totally should have.
Mm,
But it is not a low price, let's say.
mm, mm.
I think I don't know how the economy compares between 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons versus Pathfinder first edition, but I just made a 5th edition character, and the starting gold was 90 gold pieces. So that's 135 times a level 1 character. And I know wealth goes up significantly, but that is still, I would say, out of range of even people who can cast the spells Detect Thoughts, and Suggestion is the other spell that you need in order to craft it. Which my theory is that Suggestion is having Suggestion as part of the magical enchantment is what allows you to communicate with somebody whose thoughts you are reading, because Suggestion is limited by language, and you're kind of telling somebody what to do just without compulsion. But it also does allow you to use Suggestion, but only once a day, I believe. Anyhow, so long story short, security could all be wearing, or at least the ones who are mind reading, could all be wearing a Helm of Telepathy or
Nice.
some equivalent magic item.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that. You know, the fact that it's called the Helm of Telepathy, but it does not, in fact, grant you telepathy, means that probably the spell telepathy is named after the Helm of Telepathy. Like some guy
Ooh,
came along later and said, like, I've invented a spell that lets you do that thing we were all doing with the Helm of Telepathy. Everyone went, that's great. We'll call it the Spell of Telepathy, or
nice.
telepathy for short.
Yes.
Telepathy,
Wizards.
the helm, of course, just being named after the concept of telepathy, which would have been invented by the guy at the time he invented the helm. Just to be clear.
And
Uh,
his name, of course, was Telepith, and he
yes.
named the helm his creation, or his discovery of telepathy, after himself, because he is a vain wizard.
Yeah. I mean, hey, it's his prerogative if he wants to name it after himself.
Oh, so
Uh,
also,
mhm.
why I think it is valuable to note that is that if it is a magic item that they are wearing, then if Keltham ever turns against security or other people who are observing him with detect thoughts, he may be able to steal that item, in a lawful way, as he would. But
Mm.
somehow, I hope they get a reasonable loot the bodies analog. We've already seen them trading headbands or potentially, taking a headband with a note for, hey, I owe you. I think we saw at the end of last chapter. But at some point, I think we're going to have to see some fast thinking where they need to collect useful resources. And those may be equipment of people who are not going to be able to use those items anymore.
A Pareto improvement, you might say.
Yes. Speaking of Pareto improvements, that was a note that I had, I think, earlier that I crossed out because I was trying to figure out Keltham's definition of global optimum versus local optimum. And it turns out that there's a name for that, and it's Pareto efficiency. And it's just as obnoxious as he's making it. And it's also basically, in a nutshell, the alignment problem. And so the reason there's no good solution to it is because there is no good solution to it. And so you just kind of have to work around it.
See, I feel like I used the term several times, Pareto efficiency, when trying to explain this other concept to you. So sorry that I didn't explain Pareto efficiency instead, which probably would have been more useful.
Would you care to explain now for any listeners who are still in the dark?
We all know now. Plus, they've taken that microecon course I told them.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. In order to explain price discrimination, and then later Keltham explains price discrimination.
Yes.
You really
it's just as a review session.
Yeah. All right. What do we have next? Oh yeah, it's your note. Something about illegality.
Yeah. So Lord Sirth points out, quote,
illegal isn't quite the same concept when you don't have threats, but lighting somebody on fire would get you barred from most cities, yes, since most cities contain people who prefer not to be lit on fire.
And my personal confusion is that, okay, well, that sounds a lot like they don't have laws and that they just sort of act on their collective desires, but not necessarily nominally. And Lord Sirth replies, Dathalon does have laws, it just doesn't enforce them with threats in the decision theoretic sense. And their concept of laws is rather different than ours or Cheliax's, which are partly based on threats. And there's a quote here about executions from Book 11.
Dathalon has executions too, in a certain sense. If you intentionally cause someone else's true death, you don't get kicked to the last resort, you get forcibly and preemptively cryo-suspended. Not as a deterrent, obviously, because ideal agents ignore those, and civilization doesn't build structures that would stop working if people became more ideal. Because anybody that dangerous is more danger than civilization wants to inflict on the non-true murderers in the last resort. Civilization has a motive to preemptively suspend people that dangerous, irrespective of its effect on incentives. It's not a threat.
So basically, the idea is that they recognize somebody as capable of murder, causing somebody's true death. And that's a risk that they don't want to have to manage. So they just cryosuspend you until they can figure out how to solve that problem. They sort of just treat, I guess they kind of treat crime as a disease. Is that?
Yeah, I mean,
what that
I
sounds
suppose
like?
you could certainly characterize it that way. It would be funny because it would instantly put you in mind of like, well, our cow got mad cow disease, so looks like we're just going to set it on fire. That kind of disease treatment. But hey.
Well, we're not setting them on fire. We're just cryosuspending them until we can.
That's true.
Find
Until
a solution.
Mad cow disease.
Yeah. Which I wonder if they would consider the mind control magic that is available on Golarion as a potential solution to their cryosuspended criminals problem.
Well, I don't think Eliezer Yudkowsky would like that based on what I've read by him. But it's kind of hard to see, what are you gonna do to someone if they're just like, a really murderous person? What are you gonna do to them that isn't in some way some form of mind control? Unless I guess everyone's made out of indestructible steel by the time they get cryo revived or something.
So their criminality would not have any effect anymore.
Right. I mean, maybe that sounds far away in time, but
yeah,
maybe that's the plan.
This also, now that I'm thinking about how Golarion and Dathalon might have compatibilities here, being cryosuspended on Dathalon is sort of like being turned into a statue and buried deep below the ground.
Yeah.
As in Golarion. And so if Keltham discovers that people in Dathalon actually have souls like people in Golarion, I wonder how he's going to feel about the cryosuspension.
You mean
situation.
Like if they go to an afterlife that's good or something? Instead?
Well, as in if they have the reason being turned to stone and buried is terrible is because your soul still exists. It's just going to be imprisoned. And so you will sense all of that time, just not physically.
Oh, I wouldn't. How can you sense something not physically?
I mean, if
I just assume you don't. I assume you get turned to stone, you get brought back. You're like, goodness, that was a short time. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it's been answered definitively.
You just read it as a nap, is what you're thinking. But why would that be the case? Because their bodies being destroyed causes their souls to escape, and they are able to perceive things, if not necessarily the mortal plane, actual existent planes, without use of their meat suits, basically. And so if their meat suits are petrified, how would that be terribly different as far as the soul is concerned?
Does this imply that the soul itself goes to sleep?
Yeah, I wonder what dreams are like in Golarion. Do people normally dream, or do they always think of dreams as prophecies, or do they always think of dreams as some interaction on a different plane, or do they just not dream?
Wait, they're supposed to have diverged from humans, I think. So I guess they probably just dream a normal amount.
Well, they also diverged from humans in a world where magic is a thing.
Yeah, but I mean,
and souls are a thing.
Unless there's some particular reason why they wouldn't dream. My guess is that it would be the same.
Okay, so supposing Keltham is totally okay with the cryosuspension thing, how would Keltham feel about the being turned to stone and buried thing? Because if being cryosuspended is morally okay, morally neutral, right? He doesn't think it's a thing that, or maybe he does. Maybe he mentioned that, but it seems like he doesn't think it's a thing that needs to be systemically overturned. That the system of cryosuspending people.
No, everyone loves the system of cryosuspending people on Dathalon because it's a great idea.
Right. So how would he see that as different from being petrified and buried?
I mean, are we in this hypothetical? Are we assuming that when you get petrified, you continue to experience the passage of time? Or.
Well, I think if you continue to experience the passage of time, that's definitely worse given that they are presumably assuming that cryosuspension is cool because you don't perceive it. No pun intended.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's really somewhere it could go. There could be, a big magical Golarion statue, cryopreservation project. That's during the industrialization project. He's like, we got to turn people into statues.
Yeah, you've got a spell for this to keep people on the mortal plane. Like, this is your solution for keeping evil aligned people out of hell.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe if he ever discovers that hell actually is a bad place, he will try to make this a common practice.
Yeah. Yeah, presumably.
That went way far off from decision theory, and but I don't quite remember how this was terribly important to me at the time I noted it. So hopefully I've covered the things that are outstanding.
Kind of makes you wonder how, we've learned at least one rule, I guess, that they have on Daffodilon, which is like, if you want to slap your child's wrist, you have to give them $1 in a savings account,
right?
Whatever that actual rule was. So, does everyone just decide to do that? It seems, if not, how does it happen?
Oh, if it's not a law?
Yeah, if it isn't like you gotta though. Here, or we'll find you.
Yeah, also that is kind of an interesting specific custom. I wonder how knowledge of that would be passed on, because I don't think anybody would want to be bragging about wanting to hurt their children and then putting money in a bank account instead. That sounds like a neutral thing aside from the desire to commit violence, which I think is a thing that Dathalon, or civilization at least, looks down upon.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine they'd be saying, I'm raising my kids, and I'm a committed, I don't know, pacifist or whatever they have over there on Dathalon. But yeah, sometimes because children are not rational humans, you gotta slap their wrists, and everyone nods, and then one guy says, "I've got a great idea. It's this thing with $1." Everyone goes, "Wow, that's very virtuous of you. Great idea. I'm gonna start doing that."
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's always going to be like parenting guides, books, but it still feels like a thing that somebody would not want to admit to.
Maybe, I don't know.
And so they wouldn't be able. So it would be harder to discuss out loud, I think, in order to ensure that people are following the correct advice among the parenting books that tell you how to deal with desire to beat your children.
You've taken your bit too far again, and it seems like you no longer understand the stakes that the story is actually discussing. I don't think
you mean saying beating instead of wrist slaps?
Yeah, like the actual thing they're discussing is not something that people would think was crazy violent or whatever.
Well, I mean,
it's just like
think of it as on Earth, the analog. It is, at least in my culture, generally frowned upon for teachers to slap their kids as a disciplinary practice, to the point where, I'm pretty sure there are laws against it. And I don't think anybody would, well, I can't say nobody, but I think the vast majority of people would prefer that teachers not wrist slap. So that should, I think, extend to other people responsible for raising the child. And, on Earth, kids spend about as much time at school as they do at home, or at least about as much time being cared for by teachers as they do being cared for by their parents.
Mhm.
So the standards that we would apply to teachers being able to discipline the kids should be representative of the standards that we think are socially acceptable.
Well, I think the easy answer here is that there's kind of an arbitrary amount of cultural custom in this
Yeah.
area. So, how bad people think it is exactly, whatever, varies. Yeah.
Maybe I should note that these are not the expressed opinions of the podcaster. I am not meaning on this podcast to take a stance regarding uh, degrees of violence against children and whether they are good or bad. I'm just analyzing the decision theory around it.
Your
Don't at me.
silence, your silence on the child violence issue is deafening. That's all I'm going to say on the topic. So the next topic, assuming we're done with that, is I just wanted to get on the record. I don't think it will actually do anything, but in my opinion, the optimal reading speed to read this book is probably faster than if you're just reading along with us and listening along with us as we release this, one book unit every 2 weeks, or even if we went one book unit every 1 week, you should actually read the entire thread in like 1 week. And, maybe you won't find that the right way, but that's my instinct on how you should do it. But that's
This
just
is
not really realistic for what we're doing here. So,
and I don't think you should necessarily take that as encouragement to unsubscribe to this podcast. I will say, so first off, having a ordered discussion about it is, I think, helpful. The community is helpful. But also, something that I have experienced in my own podcast consumption history is that for books that I have read already, I have enjoyed going back and listening to analysis podcasts even after I have completed the book, because
that
it's
is
cool.
true.
Sometimes you will get takes that you had not considered at the time. And not necessarily directly from us, but maybe from our listener feedback episodes.
Or you could get multiple contradictory takes from us, and
Ooh.
then you'll have multiple ways. I guess I should mention two things. One is I think the optimal way to read it is how I described. But this way isn't like super suboptimal. It's just a little bit. And also, if you simply imagine what reading it faster would have been like, that's probably a pretty good approximation of what it would have been like. So you can also have knowledge of that experience. That's right. Simply combine the concepts in your mind. You can do it.
You can do it. Yeah, the reading speed, I think, was part of the thing that I don't want to say killed, but ended our predecessor podcast.
Yeah.
It's hard to align a schedule where you have to be on the same page as somebody else, or even worse, many somebody else's.
Yeah. Yeah.
When everybody has different reading speeds.
That does make me curious if we are effectively going faster than the previous hosts. I believe yes. I believe considerably, but I cannot back that up. Except I guess they covered like one chapter an episode.
So I actually, because I was part of the figuring all this stuff out, I believe the average amount for their episodes was somewhere around 18,000 words. Some of them were longer, and we are going somewhere around 30,000 words. So not quite twice as fast. And by twice as fast, I mean per episode. We are actually, I think, going over time slower than they were. I
Mm,
hoped to go faster, but I did not realize how much work podcasting was.
The work of podcasting is all an illusion, as revealed to us by the Tao Te Ching. And when you realize that, the listeners will curse my name because we will go back to uploading raw, unedited files.
Yeah.
That's my plan. But you do make them nicer.
I am considering that. Not gonna lie. But right now, I am enjoying doing this. It just is
Oh,
taking a lot
nice.
of time.
Well, as long as you're having fun, then you win.
So yeah, I will try to keep winning.
Nice. Oh, and
Um,
I'm going to get ahead to my next note, which is related, unless you were about to say something.
go ahead.
Yeah, so my next note is this it's this web comic called Invisible Bread. It's by Justin Boyd. The web comic in particular is called Runner. It's from the year 2011, from the month of 11, I guess, based on this URL. And should I narrate the entire comic out loud right now, or simply skip by?
I was just gonna see how far you got.
All right, I'll go for it. So in
All
the
right.
first panel, you have like a sweaty man. These are your kind of bulbous stick figures. That's a bad description. But anyway, there's a green man and he's sort of kneeling over. He's hunched over and he says, "How was that, coach?" And then his coach, who's in a blue shirt and he has sort of like male pattern baldness hair. You know, the sort of black reverse sunglasses look.
Pardon me.
like
I'm going
like
to.
those.
I'm gonna mute my microphone so I don't laugh so loudly over you right now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So he looks like he has one of those Cloud City communication devices from Star Wars. And he also has a little mustache. Anyhow, so the green guy says, "How was that, coach?" And the blue guy, who I guess is the coach, says,
Okay,
"You
wait.
must run faster." Yeah.
Hang on a second. What is this Cloud City communication device?
Oh, there's just a guy like in the background of Star Wars when they go to Cloud City who has sort of a male pattern baldness sort of looking device on the back of his head. It's just that
Oh,
shape.
just like the shape of his headband is
Yeah.
that the open part is his eyes with
It's
the
like
front of his
the
face.
whole. It basically it's like if you wore headphones, but you just tilted them backwards, so the
Mm.
band went around the back of your head.
All right, so we'll just imagine
Yeah.
that that's what this stick figure is wearing.
Yeah. Anyway, so the green guy says, "How is that, coach?" And the blue guy says, "You must run faster." And then the next panel is this. There's a sign that says "Regional Race Event." It's the end of a finish line, and the green guy is running. He's sweating, and then there's a gray guy in front of him who's crossing the finish line, and he looks happy. And then in the background is the blue guy who seems to be holding a stopwatch or something, and sort of looking maybe a little bit stern. And then next panel, the green guy says, "Second place. I'm getting better, coach." And then the blue guy says, "Faster. Run faster." So then the next two panels are the green guy running and then running up a hill. And then the blue guy says, "Faster." And then the green guy is running and he looks intense. And then the next panel, it has a little caption, "At the World Races." And the green guy is running on a track and he's saying, I won by a lot." And the coach says, "Well done, Kyle. Well done." Which isn't, I mean, I guess the punchline is that he ran fast. Anyway, that's how I feel when I think about what advice I would give to people about reading this book, and how some people, I guess, would get frustrated by how, quote unquote, nothing happens. And I'm like, just read faster. Read
I
faster.
I feel like you're missing a critical part of the punchline here.
Mm-hmm.
There are in fact two more panels, one of which
Oh,
is the
see,
trophy that says fastest guy, Kyle. And then the last panel is that same trophy, very tiny by comparison to the trophy of world's best coach, Coach Burtz. So I think
okay.
in this situation you are Coach Burtz. Is that what
Yes,
I'm hearing?
that is definitely me. Yes. and everyone will think what a great podcast he made, where he told everyone to read this story faster. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm just looking at it on my phone, and that must have cut out the panels, because I remembered those panels. I thought, wow, did I hallucinate those panels back when I read this in 2011? That's crazy. Maybe they're in some other comic, but this is funny too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the funniest part of the comic, is the two trophies. And
So
one's for the coach who just says, run faster.
this has been Flashy Man Narrates Webcomics.
Yeah, and that's
See you next week.
again, that's invisiblebread.com. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I think you can also, I can't do it because I'm on, I can do it. But you can also click, there's a little there's an invisible image of bread that if you click it, it becomes visible, and it also shows you a bonus panel. So I'm going to read that out
Ooh.
now. It looks like it's a piece of paper, which is sort of redundant because it's a comic panel. But it's got coaching notes written at the top of it, and in the middle is the word faster written in all capital letters, and then it's underlined twice. And then there are three pieces of text that all are written around with like arrows pointing to the middle text, and there's make Kyle, more, and needs to be. And then down in the lower right it says also more mustache, and you might remember the coach had a mustache.
Yeah,
That's what that's a reference to.
And Kyle notably did not.
Well, yeah, I mean most people don't have mustaches.
But it's an important part of his training, you see.
Yeah, it wasn't grow a mustache faster.
So
all right.
one part of my previous job before I became a
Mhm.
professional podcaster involved writing alt text for images. And luckily, there is a field that is longer than the 255 characters that fit in alt text. But I think you might have been good at that part of the job. You definitely covered, I think, all of the important elements of this webcomic.
Well, thank you. I'm flattered.
From the colors of their outfits to the emotions they are expressing, all important things. You should consider
Yeah.
a career in accessibility.
Speaking of which, is there any alt text on this webcomic?
From what I can tell, it just says runner.
Oh, nice. That's the
I think
title
it's
of the
just the
comic.
title. Yeah,
Very good.
it's kind of unfortunate, the whole alt text thing, that I really liked alt text being a thing. And that's kind of gone away a little bit with mobile devices being so prevalent, because it's almost
Right.
impossible to read the alt text on a mobile device. You have to
Yeah.
long press, and then you have to pick the right option, and then you have to scroll in some arcane way, and it's just a hassle.
It just, when I long press, it just shows me the file name. And we've learned, twist ending, this was the 22nd day of the month when it was published. So paying that off.
Yeah, important.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you for being our coach through this
Mm.
story and encouraging us to go faster.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It was my honor.
All right. I have a note about Zon-Cathon and Nethys. And I remember the Nethys part, but I'm blanking on the Zon-Cathon part.
Do you want me to give your note for you?
That's what it is. We were talking about how Nethys did that thing in the chat where when he sent Iamidi, I believe, to go say, hey, I already did this 30 seconds ago, but here's all that fun stuff. In order to get around the sort of standing order or understanding of the pseudo-hypothetical chats, that if anything is learned from a pseudo-hypothetical chat, which is discarded, nobody is to act on it. But by doing that thing 30 seconds earlier, Nethys was able to get away with it. Whereas Zon Cathan, we saw last chapter or last book, was not so good at that planning and was just trying to pretend that he was by making his general kill himself.
Yeah. Cinematic parallels.
Yes. And unless you have any other notes, well, either way, I can hop onto this note, which is that as of today, recording, the audiobook has caught up to the podcast, which means you can today subscribe to Ask Who's audiobook podcast and listen to book 12, which we will be discussing next week. And I would like to forward some thanks from Ask Who to the podcast's executive producer, John Doe, who has some numbers after his screen name, which I will not read because I don't know how private those are supposed to be. But yes, John Doe, number, who generously supported the audiobook podcast so that we can have lovely things to fill our ears with as we are racing along to finish this book.
True. Thank you, you generous and extremely anonymous man.
Yes.
Or woman. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yes. All right. Well, that's all I had to cover.
Yeah, and that is all the listener feedback I have as well, including my notes. Just sneak peek for something that you will be listening to in not 30 seconds. You're going to get some more digressions on headbands and also some discussion on Ira Glass's evil twin. So that'll be fun, I hope.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Or don't. It's up to you. I mean, live your best life, really.
Live your best life. Catch you guys all next week for book 12.
Catch you on the flip side.
She also, in this interaction, gets her actual headband. And I'm a bit confused about the story around her headband because she already did have a headband, and it was never mentioned that she took it off at any point. When she was first given it, we have Mylal saying,
"It's also been suggested to me that you, Sevar, had to buy your own intelligence headband because Requisitions was being weirdly obstructionist about it and gave you a 2-week delivery time. The one you purchased will, on this version, arrive with the next delivery we get, later today."
Which aligns with her going to get it right now. But, of course, then immediately after he said that, he handed her a headband, which we had seen earlier he had received already. And she put it right on, which we see also confirmed when she arrived in the library. And we've got Paxty commenting on it.
Paxty's shiny new arcane sight shows that the circlet Carissa now wears is a powerful magic item.
Oh!
You've got an intelligence headband. When do the rest of us...
So
it didn't occur to me that the headbands were made of metal. I thought they were wearing ninja headbands or something this whole time.
Yeah, I was not thinking ninja headbands, but them being metal did not occur to me either. And honestly, not until now either, rereading that part, even though I read it several hours ago. But yes, or several weeks ago, I guess. So yeah, it's a metal headband. That's interesting. A circlet.
But I kind of don't understand what your confusion about the headband is. Could you sum it up in like a sentence?
Well, okay, so we see her put it on there when she gets it, but then here we see her going to pick it up half a day later. So she already has it, but she's going to pick it up again.
Pick it up from Farah Malal?
Yeah, from the same place where she got it in the morning
Hmm.
already.
Yeah, I didn't notice that part.
Yeah. And she did still have the same story that Ferrer gave her. And she said this even while having the headband on. She said,
Officially, acquisition said it'll be 2 weeks, and I went ahead and ordered one myself, which I can afford to do, and you can't because I've been earning a generous salary from Cheliax for my work at the World Wound for 6 years, and you haven't. The gossip is that this is because, some intelligence headbands are cursed, and even worse, some are just a tiny bit cursed, make you see things in a particular light. And optimistically, acquisitions is making really sure the project headbands are good, and pessimistically, well, they could be manufacturing them a little cursed.
so that's the whole story that she gives the Haremites when she sees them and they notice that she has a headband.
Right.
But then at lunchtime, in the next chapter, she tells Keltham,
For notes on sexual questions, I can make some time in my busy evening schedule. Anyway, I'll have a headband by then. Maybe it'll make me better at explaining things.
Okay, yeah. So I guess the whole idea is that, like, when they said later today, they did mean she had to like give it back and then put it back on again, just to make the timeline work out and make Keltham slightly less suspicious that she has a headband now.
yeah. So right after she told Keltham that she'll get a headband later, she says,
I tromped over to acquisitions this morning once it seemed like you were occupied and asked what the delay is, and they were still like, hey, couple of weeks, we don't think it'd be beneficial to rush, so I said, fine, I've been at the World Wound for 6 years. I nearly had a headband amount of money saved up anyway. I'm getting paid much more now. How much of a loan on my future salary are we talking about? And it was 6 days. So I bought one.
so we've seen her already having
Ooh,
bought
kitty
that
cat.
headband
Hi, kitty.
told.
Oh.
Hey, I already have that soundbite. I don't need you to
You
say
get
that
that
again.
soundbite every
I'll just pretend you play that soundbite every time I go off on a long digression that I don't want interrupted, mister. I haven't gotten to the end of these quotes that I'm going to insert from the audiobook.
Okay, well, keep going.
That's okay. There's only... Oh god, there's more. I think 4 more here. So at the end of the lecture, she gets the sweets from Pilar and then says,
Thank you, Pilar. I'm going to go get my headband. Probably I'll come to magic lessons, but don't wait on me. I might want to reread all my math textbooks first or something.
So yeah, like you said, maybe she took it off before lunch, but then even her inner monologue later says,
She'll just go in and learn what ridiculous things have happened in the last 3 hours and get her headband and figure out what to do about Asmodia.
and that says get her headband, not get her headband back or put her headband back on. So I think maybe at some point there they realized that they had made that inconsistency. And I think here is where Yarwain noticed it.
Well, getting your headband back is merely a type of getting your headband. So I think it's consistent.
Yeah. So the other reason why I think it's weird that she would have given it up for a while is that when she gets it, quote unquote, back, she comments,
It's nice how she's not going to have to take it off this time.
makes sense. But then later, when she offers to let Asmodia borrow hers, we see her internally consider how painful it will be to remove, as if she hadn't already been through that earlier.
Maybe.
Right. And that's interesting also. It says,
Wizards more inclined to poetry than Carissa have described taking headbands off, not +2, Generally, they're talking about +4, but still, as like 30% of the way to being dead. Carissa takes her headband off and tries not to make a face about it.
Which actually is kind of painful in the Pathfinder rule set. And the reason is because headbands over the first 24 hours, the bonus they give you is just a temporary bonus. And so it's just like Fox's Cunning. It increases the modifiers to rolls you make, like a knowledge roll or saving throw. It increases the DCs that other creatures or people have to roll when they make attacks on you, and it increases your effectiveness at some things. Like for the related strength spell, it would increase your ability to lift heavy things, for example. But after 24 hours, it becomes a permanent bonus, which also gives you awesome things like increasing the number of spells per day you can prepare and cast. And it can unlock feats and class abilities that have prerequisites to use or gain. And there are also some prestige classes that might require things that can only be unlocked by having a higher ability score. So taking it off actually does potentially tear away things that you have learned or gained after putting it on.
Right. So, yeah, that's interesting.
30% of the way to being dead, apparently.
Now that you've said the word prestige class, and I remember that from D&D or whatever, but now that I'm hearing it again years later, it reminds me of the phrase like prestige dialect, and I think that's funny.
What is a prestige dialect?
So it's like you're in a country and you all speak, I don't know, Japanese and various different dialects of Japanese. And then there's one type of Japanese that's like the Japanese the fanciest people and the emperor use. And that's the prestige dialect.
So not just like an accent, but also like actual vocabulary.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a prestige accent as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Interesting. Yeah. Actually, I noted something quickly shortly after this about prestige classes because Carissa mentions in her pondering about powerful spellcasting abilities someone named Nefreti Clepati, who she
Nefreti
mentioned
Clepati.
before. Yeah, Nefreti Clepati. Is that
I mean,
your
I'm just telling you what a robot told me.
Yes. Who I don't think we got any characterization of. She was just mentioned in comparison to power levels, basically, both here and in an earlier chapter as well. But yeah, so I looked her up, and she is apparently the High Priestess of Nethys, and rumored to be the most powerful living spellcaster in the Inner Sea.
Whoa.
And she has a prestige class, which is one of the favoritist prestige classes among D&D players and Pathfinder players, the Mystic Theurge, which allows you to cast both arcane and divine spells and gain spellcasting ability in them as if you gained 2 class levels. So for each one prestige level, you effectively gain 2 base class levels.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So she's Mystic Theurge level 10 with 3 levels in Wizard and 7 levels in Cleric, which effectively makes her a level 13 Wizard, which is 7th Circle, and a level 17 Cleric, which is 9th Circle.
Very cool.
So, yeah, prestige classes can be very cool, and I love that there's a High Priestess of the god of basically knowledge of, everything, as it were, who is a mystic theurge.
Yeah.
So Carissa was thinking about that when she put the headband back on. But yeah, so Asmodea's thinking, not thinking these heretical thoughts, and in particular, when they're done talking about the heretical thoughts,
She's having way too many disloyal pre-thoughts and should stay further from security's focus until they go away.
And I thought when she mentioned that, there probably is security around here listening to her. But with the intelligence headband, that +2 also would effectively give her a +1 to will saves, which means she might be better able to resist having her thoughts read while she's wearing the headband. So,
And you fake that your thoughts are like it won't work if they're just like, that's weird. She's resisting her will save.
yeah,
But maybe they can't tell.
that is a long conversation I had with other members of my tabletop role-playing group is if you succeed in a will save against detect thoughts, can you instead put out fake thoughts, the thoughts that you want somebody to read from you with like a successful bluff check, perhaps, which I think is kind of like how Occlumency works in Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality.
Right. I was thinking the same thing.
And I believe the answer ultimately was no, that we came up with at least. But we do get a spell that does let you do something like that later in this book.
Whoa.
So we have that to look forward to. And I made a note so we can see that when we get to it.
Also, I don't know if this is rules as written, but I suppose you could just resist particular of your thoughts being read, and then, you're having all these thoughts, and then the heretical ones just, I just wasn't having a thought then. I'm not always having thoughts.
Yeah, I think they also mentioned that somewhere in this book. And I don't remember where it was, or whether it was security thinking that or Keltham thinking that. I think probably rules as written, you cannot filter specific thoughts. It just straight up doesn't work.
I will mention before we move on that thing about turning somebody into a book and then rewriting them definitely makes me think about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure might even be that part of it might even be based on a D&D spell. Who knows? Or they might both be based on the concept of books.
The concept of books. I actually am unfamiliar with JoJo's Great Adventure, but I think I saw that in the archives of this podcast. Am I hallucinating that? Did you analyze it earlier?
It could. Someone may have commented that. I could search for that. Fill time. Tell them about the rest of the story.
And they noted that he speaks in baseline to Keltham. And I was kind of wondering why they called that out. What he was saying wasn't exactly a secret, and it is not unlikely that anybody coming to give orders or act in a general capacity, it's not unlikely that they would have tongues or some other kind of language spell in order to make sure that everybody can hear them. But interestingly, he speaks telepathically to the Cheliax soldiers.
Wait, why do you think Gorthoklek was speaking baseline?
When he first landed, he told Keltham to stay near him. The quote is,
"He lands on top of the Cuthites about to attack Keltham without that significantly slowing his massive clawed feet from striking the ground. Stay near me." He speaks in low, rumbling baseline, words that Carissa can probably recognize by now as Dathilani in intonation, even if she doesn't know the meaning.
Ah, right, yes. So he just, cast a magic spell to be able to say that, I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
Unless
I was
all demons speak Dathilani.
Yeah, I was curious enough to look this up in Pathfinder rules to see if he can actually speak all languages. According to Pathfinder rules, he, just like normal devils, speaks a variety of evil-aligned languages and doesn't have any particular language abilities except for telepathy, which is language independent. So speaking baseline is something that would be a divergence from canon, obviously, I think, but that he's speaking it may, and that they're calling it out, may give us some information about the relationship between Dathalon and Hell, or at least the outsiders.
Yeah, I kind of think he just cast, speak foreign language spell. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever those spells are.
All right, what is your impression of what a phonon coupled paired electron superfluid is?
My impression is, magnets, how do they work? To
I
quote
see.
Insane Clown Posse.
Oh my god, I love that video. That is one of my favorite music videos. Out there, along with All Your Bass Are Belong to Us, another classic music video, and the Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny. There we go. Those are my 3 favorite music videos. No else compare.
Nice. The weird thing about phonons is that they are named after sound because apparently they're analogous, even though they aren't really sound. They're kind of like extremely microscale sounds a bit, is what I'm getting from this.
So they're like sounds in the sense of being waves in physical space?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay. See, I'm asking you all this as if I'm quizzing you, but actually I don't know the answer, so I am genuinely curious. And I did not look this up.
As in many cases, it's like that The Onion headline, man with none of the facts in heated debate with the man with half of the facts.
Yep, that describes the internet. Maybe Keltham's assumption is that everybody should have an identity as a specialist.
Right.
He was surprised that, for example, the shoemaker was also a farmer, which is an understandable surprise because those are both, from his perspective, full-time jobs, and holding 2 full-time jobs is, why are you doing that? But in this case, it seems to go further in that not just he objects to people holding multiple jobs, but he's objecting to somebody with the identity of being able to perform this job, performing a different job instead. That they're not optimizing for their own specialization.
Right. Yeah.
It's a thing that I'm kind of curious how Dathalon deals with people who just don't like their jobs after having performed them for a while. I was a tutor and a teacher for a while, and I felt like I had some good training and skills in that arena, but I eventually realized, I just don't really like teaching. I don't feel like it's bringing me the kind of joy that it would bring other teachers. And so I want to go do something else. And even though I mostly have the skills for education, I much preferred to change careers into something else. And I wonder if there just aren't people like that on Dathalon.
It's gotta happen occasionally.
Yeah, that's gotta happen.
Yeah.
So how how would they deal with that? And why is Keltham so surprised that there would be somebody who has multiple specialties, basically? Not who does multiple things, but who, has high skill in one arena and yet is doing something else in a different arena. That does not seem like it should be a surprise, particularly given how much he is a generalist, really. I guess on Dothalon, he's still a student, right? We have not seen any indication that he had a profession.
I think his profession was investor.
Yeah, but everybody in Dothalon is an investor.
Some more than others.
They literally get investment accounts as rewards for passing first grade. Like
yeah, but I think those are like index funds, basically. You know.
Okay, so Keltham's like a hedge fund manager or something.
Yeah, he's like a guy who's actually serious about investing to make money. And everyone else is like, well, that's just how, I store my money because that's how money works. And I do a regular job.
And yet here he is teaching people basic physics and logic.
True.
I mean,
true.
What is a investor doing at the site of a library? Like Keltham. Catch up here. This is a tough place. There are tough circumstances that bring people to do things.
There were extreme circumstances. But, I don't think he's like wrong that it is simply the small scale and pre-industrial economy that means the weapon enchanter has to be at the site of the battlefield,
I'll let that one go, I guess, for now.
Sure. Now that you've reminded me by mentioning sex that I checked on the place where we upload this podcast to RSS now, which we're doing now. I forget if we said that, but I made it work. Finally.
Yes. It is on Spotify, I believe, correct?
Yeah, I think I'm using Anchor FM, which is, I think, like Spotify bought them, or that was just always Spotify's thing. I don't know. Anyway, Spotify was like, you need a place
to a Spotify page.
Anyway, so yeah, now it's on Spotify where all the hip kids can listen to it. Presumably, I don't have Spotify. Anyhow, they allow you to mark things as explicit, and I was, obviously, guidelines for what should be marked as explicit are usually like very poor for some reason. I don't know. Maybe companies are just shy and they're like, it's explicit if things are depicted. And it's like, what? But I clicked on this one and it's like, if you reference sex, you're explicit. And I was like, well, this is a very clear rule. I guess we're explicit now. Every one of these episodes has been explicit. That's fair. Doesn't bother me.
I think it's probably inherited from Apple, because Apple is the storefront for so many things that anything that interfaces with the App Store has to go by their censorship rules. And they are rather tight on that censorship. I could be wrong. That could be a Spotify thing, but I think, you have to mark things explicit. Basically,
I don't know
anything that adults talk in, unless it is heavily edited, like public radio.
Do you think that's like all the people on Radiolab are just swearing like sailors, and that's why they're constantly cutting together 3-second clips of what they're saying?
I know they are.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about specifically those on Radiolab, but public radio does have swears in it, and they cut them out, and some of them will say you can get a non-bleeped version on our website. Notably, This American Life does that. But yeah, it's usually not the hosts. I think Jad Abumrad has done a few swears in there uncensored.
See,
that
I
may
want to
be
live in the
slandering
beautiful
him.
world where Ira Glass is using heavy profanity to like intensify every adjective he uses. I just think
Every
that would be
adjective.
beautiful. That would be heckin' beautiful.
Does he have more than one brother? Maybe the third brother, if they have one.
What? I don't know about Ira Glass's genealogy. I'm sorry. Or
His brother is Philip Glass, who is a
right,
well-known
obviously.
minimalist, I think, composer.
And Glass, the M. Night Shyamalan movie. I think that is his sister.
Sure. Oh, wait. Is that?
Glass, the solid substance, that is his dad. Glass, the unit of measurement, is his mom.
They are cousins, not brothers. Dang it.
Right. I didn't
Okay.
think they were like born at the same time.
At the same time, no.
You know, in
Certainly
the
not.
sort of same range I would expect. Although I don't actually know.
But yeah, maybe Ira Glass has an evil twin somewhere that he may or may not know about.
My name is Ira Steele.
Yes.
My name is Ira Roth. That's a financial instrument joke.
Thanks. Thank you.
My name is Ira Terrorist Group. If you're just joining us, this is our podcast where we discuss other podcasts.
And various puns.
True.
Apparently.
True. Yep.
In podcast host names. But plot-wise, I guess, the gods in that knowledge about what can be predicted are acting on the same information that the authors of this story have. Because this story is not written out and then edited. The things that happen in this story are happening in, effectively real time. They don't know exactly what their partner is going to do in response to the things that they bring to the table. And so their best prediction is only based on the interactions that they have had with their partner.
Maybe. Or maybe they have a plan.
Maybe they have a plan, but their plan is only, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, basically.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening here is they are not writing this in a structure that the plot can change because once they've written it all out, they go back and edit. They are writing this in a structure that it can only be written, the plot itself, that is, can only develop in one direction. They can't work backward and know exactly what events are going to come up later. They can have an idea of where they want to direct it, and maybe they can even work together to direct it in a certain way. But the way each author in particular plays their part is not perfectly predictable.
Some of these times when we come up with theories, I just imagine putting them on one of those big iceberg beams, like we're deep down the iceberg, and now there's just a phrase that says prophecy is broken equals story written in real time.
Well, that's the thing is we do have a bunch of meta notes that are just ridiculously too far away. But I honestly think this one is meaningful. That is what they mean by saying prophecy is broken.
Could be.
Is that they literally cannot say what's going to happen in the future because they do not know where this story is headed. And so as a plot point, they have to have it, since in the world that they are in, there is such a thing as prophecy and there is such a thing as augury. In order to allow those to exist, in order to allow this story to exist in that world, they have to account for the fact that they actually can't see what's happening with precision, let's say, in the future. So they have to say prophecy is broken.
Yeah, that might have been a motivation.
I have a vague recollection, though, now that I think about it, of that having also been a plot point in the canon Pathfinder world. But I think if it is there as well, it's probably for a similar reason, because the authors of the book don't want to say what's going to happen when the Pathfinder Society gets to that particular campaign module and writes the story for the next season, or however it is they do their canon world building.
Yeah.
Okay.
This does remind me of
That's-
something, but I guess it will be in feedback later. So
Oh, okay.
next week. I'll just write that down.
Okay, cool. Take slightly less time for our regular recording session then.
Sure, yeah.
I maybe I should be optimistic that we might be able to get this done in one night.
Could be.
And maybe the last 20% will be completely ad lib, off the cuff, since I, as of right now, have not completely finished the book.
We'll just
So
evolve into like a live reaction.
a live reaction.
Whoa!
Yeah, I think they did that on the Too Rash, Too Unadvised podcast. At the end of one of the books, they just ran a live stream of one of the hosts rereading the book, possibly without even comment or commentary going. Just a live stream of him sitting there reading. I think I dropped in on that, but it might not have actually happened. And so if I say that I did, it might indicate that my subconscious is a bit more focused on that particular podcast than perhaps is warranted. But it is a good podcast. Anyhow,
it has occurred to me that by the time we finish this podcast, our podcast might be longer than like the equivalent audiobook of Project Lawful, and will also be much less useful. So we have that to look forward to.
Honestly, I think that is probably true. And I'm not sure that would be original to us. I think our predecessor inspiration analysis podcasts also kind of had a habit of going very long on the thing they were commenting on. I have listened to web serials in audiobook-ish form when there are dedicated fans who will read it out. And
Right.
I think for some of those, I have spent less time listening to the actual audiobook than listening to the analysis. So might not be the first to do that, but I think honestly we are on track for that to be the case. We'll have to compare to Ask Who's AI read audiobook,
Sure, yeah.
which does exist. So, fun digression.
It's definitely fine. It's just sort of funny in a cosmic sense. And then
Let's,
also, luckily, we did, if anyone was like, oh, if only I had the audiobook version of this, we referenced the audiobook version at the beginning, the AI audiobook version. So, go listen to that as well.
Yes. And we can just include that in the duration of our episodes, and then we can definitely be longer than the audiobook. Which actually, I I was noticing this as I was prepping for this recording, that my notes for the first half of this book have a lot of quotes that I pulled, and I do intend to cut those and replace them with the relevant passages from the AI book. So there may actually be a substantial amount of this book in our analysis by the time we're done. But I actually didn't pull very many quotes on the back half, and I'm kind of curious about my own psychology in that. Whether it had to do with the content or just I was reading it differently.
So if I'm understanding, for a second there, you were proposing that we make a second combined podcast where we take the audio from the audiobook and then the audio from the analysis podcast, and we just stick them together
And just
make every episode twice as long.
Yes, and have
Nice.
in between our analysis of each chapter, the reading of that particular chapter, I think would be the most appropriate way to do it.
That's like something I would do if I wanted to become like the academic critical edition of something, maybe. But then, well, I guess critical edition is the wrong phrase. But anyway, we're not really that good. But also, we might be the best one so far. So maybe maybe it is justified so far.
Yeah, I mean, we've got that power. Why not abuse it?
True. Well, speaking of abuse of power, that's right. I'm segueing back into the story. Ooh, a kitty cat. Hi, kitty. Oh. Shh.